Hello everyone, happy June holidays. This video is going to explain to you what you need to do for your Sec 2 History Alternative Assessment. So right now, I am in Google Classroom. So you just have to go to your respective Google Classroom and you'll find a folder, okay, that states Sec 2 Alternative Assessment. Okay, so what happens when you click on it? Okay, you'll see a number of items, right? Okay, first of all, let's take a look at the alternative assessment package. Okay, it's called creating content in context. A lot of C's here, you see. So as you can infer, it's a creative activity, right? So hitherto you've been consuming many sources, but for this alternative assessment, you're supposed to create the sources. And the catch to this is that the sources have to be biased. Okay, they need to contain a purpose. So as you can see, when a source is biased, right, it contains message, tone, and purpose. And then of course, for purpose, you've already learned VAMI, right? So verb, audience, message, and intended outcome. All right, and for tone, I think what I want to emphasize on is basically two tones that your sources can possibly be for this activity. It's either supportive or critical. Okay, so let's just go down to the example right now. Okay, so to show you an example of what is expected, okay, we have curated as a team, okay, this was last year's team, okay, 3 different sources, and you don't actually know the context very well, and yet you can more or less infer whether the source is supportive or critical, okay, of the topic in question. Okay, so for this source A, okay, extract from a speech by Lee Kuan Yew to announce the separation from Malaya. Okay, so the topic here is separation from Malaya. So let's just take a look at the source closely. What has happened has happened. But be firm and calm. We are going to have a multiracial nation in Singapore. This is not a Malay nation, not a Chinese nation, not an Indian nation. Unlike the Malay Malaysia promoted by the Federation of Malaysia, where the Malay community is given special privileges. For me, it is a moment of anguish. All my life, my whole adult life, I've believed in merger and unity of the two territories. We are connected by geography, economics, and ties of kinship. It broke everything we stood for. Okay, so first of all, you can see the asterisk here, right? It. Okay, it refers to the separation. Okay, guys, so at this moment, can you guys infer, okay, do you think that this source is supportive or critical of separation? Is it supportive or critical? Okay, so I hope you guessed correctly. Okay, it's actually critical, right? And you can tell it you can it's critical because of this sentence in particular, right? For me, it's a moment of anguish. Okay, so if you are anguished by something, you are likely critical of it. So he goes on to explain in this very famous speech that he made, and it was videoed as well. All my life, my whole adult life, I believed in merger and unity of the two territories. Right? So he felt that it wasn't something that Singapore necessarily should have to go through, but sadly, this is what it went through lah. Okay, so I hope you got this right. The answer is critical, right? It's critical of separation. Let's try another one. This one's context, right? If you look at the name here, Lenin, okay, he was one of the leaders of the Russian Revolution. Okay, so this is the context of Russia. And it's an extract from a book titled You Can't Print That by independent American journalists who criticize censorship and restrictions to journalism. This was in 1928. Okay, so I am not very sure about like the full context even now as I speak, because I wasn't the one who created this sauce bee. Okay, I just know that Americans tend not to like the Russians very much. Okay, and you don't even know if this you can't print that is solely about censorship and restrictions in Russia, okay, or the Soviet Union, or is it like censorship and restrictions in general? All right, so all these are basically gaps in our knowledge that we need to try to reconcile later on. But let's just look at the source right now, okay? Lenin never hesitated to acknowledge defeats and failures, but he was always optimistic. I was in disbelief. I wondered how this man who had so little magnetism had become popular through spellbinding oratory and silver-tongued promises. Lenin had the greatness and all too human sympathy to be a comrade to all fellow dictators and the peasants who loved him. In his battle with his enemies, he was uncompromising and without pity. He hated power, knowing its corruption. His political wisdom was great. He understood mob psychology thoroughly, but was a little weak in his grasp of individual psychology. He never made a mistake in dealing with the masses, but he frequently did in choosing men to share power. Okay, so one thing that you will observe about this source is that it's nothing to do with censorship and restrictions yet. Okay, and what you can infer from how I've been teaching you how to write the pure paragraph, right, is that it's actually providing you with a context, right? So we are still at elaboration now. So point, then you're at elaboration, right? So what context are we looking at in terms of the exercise of censorship? Okay, we're looking at a context where we have a leader who is uncompromising with his enemies, right? And yet he's politically wise, right? And he never made a mistake in dealing with the masses. Okay, but he sometimes made mistakes with sharing power. Okay, so that's an important contextual knowledge for you to have in terms of understanding, okay, the person who's actually using censorship and restriction as a tool to govern, right? And that's Lenin. Okay, so do you think that on the overall, the main message, right, is the tone, right? Is it supportive or critical? Is it supportive or critical of the use of censorship and restrictions? Okay, I hope you actually selected supportive, because this is supportive, and you can see that through the authors, okay, praise for Lenin. Okay, he was throughout, you know, even in his like criticism of Lenin, I think it only in a way written in a way, right, to emphasize even more about his strength, right, that in spite of his inherent weaknesses, he still managed to achieve great things. So you can tell, okay, through the descriptions that were being used, right, spellbinding oratory, silver-tongued promises, all too human sympathy, okay, political wisdom was great, right, never made a mistake in dealing with the masses. So all those words are kind of hyperbolic, right? In a way, they are vivid descriptions. Okay, so these are all like literary devices that you learn in English, right? But when you see them in history, and then you see not just like one or two uses of them, but within two paragraphs, like repeated use of vivid description to praise Lenin, I think it's suffice to say the author right, is supportive of Lenin. And perhaps this becomes a very good context to then justify why there was a need for censorship and restriction, right? Because if you acknowledge that, okay, the leader is a good leader, then perhaps some level of censorship and restriction, okay, is justified. So in this case, when you compare the, okay, provenance, which is the line above the box, right, with the content itself, you'll be like, hey, it doesn't match, right? Because the American journalists criticize censorship and restrictions, and yet okay, within the source itself, he appears to be censoring. He appears to be supportive of Lenin, okay, whom we know through our historical knowledge is someone who actually practices some level of censorship and restrictions, right? So in which case, which one should we focus on? Yeah, I think you need to focus on the source itself rather than the provenance. Okay, this source is still supportive. Last but not least, just to show you that you can actually infer a tone even from a pictorial source. Okay, we're gonna go to Germany now. Okay, in the 1940s. Okay, many of you already know this, but some of you could be the first time you're learning this. Okay, Germany was under the rule of Hitler from 1933 onwards, right? They essentially voted him in. Okay, but very soon after that, he combined the roles of chancellor and president to become Germany's very first dictator, right? Called himself the Führer, and he governed Germany as if it was a dictatorship. Okay, so under this dictatorship, okay, there was very limited freedoms, okay, particularly politically. So in this cartoon, right, by Stephen Roth, published in a British newspaper, okay, we see a cartoon titled "Art Has Become Very Spontaneous and Sincere Under the Supervision of the National Socialism." Okay, National Socialism is just a longer name for Nazism. And then 1933, okay, so in the midst of the Second World War. Okay, what we also know as kind of common knowledge was that there were two major alliances, okay, that fought against each other during the Second World War, and that was the Allies and the Axis powers, right? Of which Germany belonged to the Axis, whereas the British belonged to the Allies. So for the provenance itself, you can more or less infer, okay, that this source would be critical. Okay, but it's inadequate to just base on provenance. We also have to look for clues within this picture. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a few seconds now to think about it first. Look at this picture and tell me, is it critical or supportive? Okay, so as you're looking at it, I just would like you to look at the use of literary devices, in which case, look at the title. And also look at the concept of foreground and background, right? What do you see in the foreground? What do you see in the background? And the third thing I want you to look at is the composition of the piece, right? Who is the largest person in the piece? Who's a slightly smaller person? Okay, because size does matter when we are looking at political cartoons, right? It emphasize the symbolic differences. Okay, so time's up. Okay, I hope that you all have selected critical. Right. Okay, so in this piece, it's obvious that the author is critical, right? He believes that Nazi rule, right, is not good for the German people, particularly German artists. And you can see that through a few pieces of evidence. Like for instance, in the foreground, you see a German artist, a German painter, being coerced, right? His hand is being held by a secret police officer who was threatening him with a baton, right? So this shows us that the state was controlling the artwork that was produced by painters. And in the background, you can see some of the outcomes of this coercion, right? You see many portraits, different pieces of art through the ages, okay, are being remodeled, okay, to contain Hitler's image, which shows us that art in Germany now serves the sole function of glorifying Hitler, okay, and Nazism. So art is no longer spontaneous and sincere, right? In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. It's very controlled and lightly insincere, okay, lightly coerced. So in that sense, you can also say that, okay, I can also see the use of sarcasm as a literary device in the titling of the piece. So this is critical. All right, so back to source A, B, C, you can see that all three sources are similar in the sense that they all have a biased tone, right? They all either are critical or supportive. Okay, so with that in mind, that's a very, very important foundational understanding for you to complete this task. Okay, because based on the group that you've been assigned, okay, that you have chosen for yourselves, you'll be assigned a source. Okay, and the topic is Malayan Union. And each and every of this source must either be supportive or critical. Okay, if you look at the source and it appears to be both, okay, then which one of it is greater? You can actually infer that, okay, the main message of it has to be one side, right? So if you do see some form of balance, that would be a sub-message. Commit to it, okay? And then after that, what you need to do is to create one source that agrees with the position, okay, of the given source, and one source that disagrees. Okay, so if the given source is supportive, okay, your created source has to be supportive as well for the agree side, okay, and it has to be critical for the disagree side. All right, so I'm just gonna go through the rubrics first very quickly. Okay, for this rubrics, you have 4 criteria. Okay, and we always aim towards getting 5 to 4 marks here. Okay, so comprehend and select information. Source content of both sources is consistent with the main source, right? So you need to be able to identify the nuance within the source, right? I can just give you a hint that each source likely focuses on one stakeholder's point of view, okay, regarding the Malayan Union. So when you are creating the source that agrees and the other source that disagrees, right? Is it consistent with that stakeholder? Next, analyze context and apply to information. Okay, so this is when you need to write a provenance that is as clear as possible. Okay, for this, try to use 5W, 1H, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Of course, it's quite short. It can't be too long, but I love the source C with Hitler in it because they managed to even incorporate a bit of sarcasm in the provenance. It's very important to include the year as well. Connect, synthesize, and transform. Okay, so when you are creating the source, you are likely going to encounter many actual sources. So definitely collate them within the provenance section of the template. Okay, and then make sure that all of the information and content that you put into the created source is logical and consistent. It has to be historical as well. Like, I'll just give you an example. For instance, in the past, okay, it was quite rare for women to take part in protests. Okay, not totally now, but very, very rare. Okay, so if your source was created by a woman and she's the leader of the revolution, she's the leader of the protest party, then there's some content inconsistency. Okay, last but not least, this section would actually apply more to the graphical source. Okay, so as you have heard, you need one source, so pictorial source, and the other source as a written source, right? Okay, so for instance, if you want to create a cartoon like source C, right? Is it coherent? Is it relevant? So for me, my advice that I have given to some of my classes, okay, and I want to give it to you right now, is that don't try to bite off too much of the apple in one bite, right? How do you eat an apple? You just take a bite and then chew, swallow, then take another bite, right? So someone tries to bite too much, right? You spoil your teeth. So you can't encapsulate every single message in a cartoon. Like you see Source C, it's very focused on the idea of political freedoms, right? The freedom of expression, right? But imagine if you are trying to create one overarching ultimate epic cartoon that represents everything that's wrong with the Malayan Union. You are going to lack coherence already because I don't know what you're trying to say. So take a bite of the apple and tell me from one perspective, and that's adequate. Okay, sometimes when it's too much, you're gonna make a bigger mistake there. Okay, so don't have to be so perfectionist in that regard. It actually works against you. Okay, at this point, just give you some more help. Okay, I reckon that some of you are now panicking because you say, I am not an artist. How am I going to create art? Okay, so this is a pictorial source and it's not basically a cartoon. Okay, it's a black and white photograph. And can you tell whether it's critical or supportive? Okay, I hope you can identify that it's critical. It's quite straightforward. So you say this, you read this, Malaya for Malays, Malayan Union not wanted. Okay, and you see a group of Malay men and boys dressed in traditional Malay clothes, right? So one of the things you can possibly do, of course, is also to create a poster. Okay, you can see it's also in Arabic. And then borrow clothes from your Malay neighbors and pose for a picture. Okay, and make sure it's black and white. So you don't necessarily have to be a very good artist. You can also be a photographer. And I think it's very important for you to know. You see, can you see any women in the picture? No, right? Yeah, because back in the 40s, there was still you know, very defined gender roles. Okay, so women mostly were not involved in these protests. Okay, if I were to actually type in something else, just to contextualize it within our school's context, actually in the 50s, there were very many protests led by Hwa Chong students. In fact, Hwa Chong students were famous for you know, leading protests. Okay, so you can simply Google it to see some of these pictures that emerge, okay, from actually a lot of it is not lah, right? Yeah, I guess it wasn't specific enough. Okay, but you even when you look at like this kind of protest pictures, right, from all around the world, I think you see some very consistent features, right? You see that there are posters, okay, you see that there are people marching, right? The context also, where are they marching? Okay, typically they march at places that can actually gain them media attention, right? And also observe like you can actually observe which eras they came from based on you know, the clothes that they wore, whether the painting is in black and white, right? So these are all the details that lead to coherence, right? And I think some people are just naturally very good at dressing up, okay, at finding the costumes. So then that's where you're going to shine, okay? Because then you get to figure out, okay, how does a businessman look like in the 40s? Let me just type in for you. Maybe if I'm just gonna be very specific, if I type 1950s, it actually, you know, it shows you some of the dressing that is common in the 50s. Okay, so then it gives you the opportunity to then see if you have certain clothing items that can mimic that. Um, do not actually use like blackface, right? Let's say if the racial group that you are looking at is Indians, do not go and do something like blackface. Yeah, that was a big mistake done by RI a couple of years ago as a joke, but it wasn't very funny many years later when it was revealed, right? Those stories were revealed. And then also, I believe like just last year or the year before for D&D, some Chinese people also went blackface, okay, to represent black musicians. Okay, that's actually quite condescending. So it's okay. I understand if you are Indian and you're dressed in Indian clothing, that's adequate for me. There is no need for you to go and paint your face black or to use a computer software to make yourself look like a Indian person. Last but not least, this is also another advice given by another teacher in the department. You see some of the traditional dressing actually requires you to be half naked, like you're not wearing a top. And if you think that, okay, I want to be very coherent, I want to be consistent, I don't want to wear my top, I'm just going to wear my sarong. Nudity is also not permitted for this assignment. Okay, so not like nudity, but basically not being fully dressed lah. So make sure you're fully clothed, like in that Malayan Union poster that I shared with you previously. You can still dress in traditional clothing without having to compromise your propriety. All right, so there has been a template that has been provided to you. Okay, so you will be you have been provided the template on your Google Classroom. Okay, so it's quite short, it's just 3 pages long. So just copy and paste over your provided source. Okay, then you write down your main message, okay, and the evidence, explanation, and then provide your written source or pictorial source, and then do the same. Okay, and then the last one, right? So how would I recommend that y'all go about doing it? I think that like first and foremost, most important thing is to make sure that you guys are all on the same page in terms of agreeing whether the source supports or disagrees, right? That's very important. I hope you can do that like this week. And then after that, you can spend the remaining 3 weeks of the holiday creating the sources. Um, you know, I tried this activity in a class that had actually not missed any lesson throughout like the term. Very lucky class lah. So that class managed to create a written source already within 40 minutes. So you don't actually need that much time to create like a written source, you know. I think what you need a little bit more time on is to spend a bit more time on is to create a very convincing political cartoon. And if you can do it, I think you can make use of all the things that I've taught you today, right? Like literary devices, in terms of naming the political cartoon. You can make use of composition, you can make use of size differential, you can make use of foreground, background, right? You can make use of exaggeration. So if you are an artist or you have someone in the group that's an artist, that person can really spend one good day really thinking about it, then share that piece of art with everyone for their feedback. Okay, alternative, I've also got some students who are in the drama club and then they really want to act out a scene. So they're actually curating now, like how we get the clothes, where are we going to pose, are we going to do green screen, and then are we going to like you know, Photoshop many other people behind us, things like that, right? I feel like you can be very creative, and with the technology that we have today, even with AI to help you generate some of like the background images, you're gonna create a very good piece of a good like created photograph, right? Or you can create a really nice political cartoon, all within one day. Yeah, so of course, I always believe that the journey is more important than the end product, right? I think this is quite a fun way of learning history versus our usual way of like consuming sources, analyzing them, writing essays, right? And I think that if you take it seriously, you're gonna do well because this is not a very difficult piece of work, okay? And you're also gonna have fun, right? So it's 15% of your marks, so take it seriously, but also have fun. And then when I see you in term 3 week 1, you have a few more days to check with me whether the work is going in the right direction before you submit it to Google Classroom on the Friday of term 3 week 1 lah. Okay, so Friday 2359, that is the deadline. Right, and then after that, we have the rest of term 3 to prepare you for the end of year exams, which is worth 70% of your marks. Okay, so this is the video, and I am going to record another one. Okay, that's gonna explain to you how to do your holiday homework, individual essay assignment. See you guys in a bit.